Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Product-Led Marketing Show presented by the Product-Led Marketing community. In this podcast series, we feature the top marketers from the PLG companies all over the world. Today we have Partho Ghosh, who is a Senior Director of Product Growth at Hootsuite. He is a customer-obsessed, data-informed product leader and product-led growth consultant with over a decade of experience in B2B SaaS, MarTech, and e-commerce. He's one of the earliest members of the community, and he did a session at our last year's Blast Off conference as well. Hi Partho, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Excited to chat.
You have extensive experience working in product management, product leadership roles, and teaching product management. You are really passionate about product-led growth and product vision. Tell us a little bit about how and when you had this light bulb moment that product-led growth is the way to go.
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple of years ago, it's going more than a couple now, I got in B2B SaaS at a company named Unbounce. Unbounce is the, leading landing page builder. They created that category of kind of landing page builders. And, for the first 7 or 8 years of that company, they didn't even have a sales team. Everything was through the product. Everything was organic. When we brought in a sales team, it was all inbound only and very focused on that. So, product-led growth and SaaS, product-led growth as a term wasn't really coined back then. That was 7-8 years ago. And so, but that was my foray into SaaS, and that kind of really founded, I was in e-commerce before that, and e-commerce and the product management I was doing in e-commerce was quite different than the product management I was doing at this B2B, SaaS startup that was really kicking ass and taking names. So what I found, the light bulb moment, was when I then joined other SaaS businesses, expecting, what I had at Unbounce was going to be very similar, was not the same. It was just very different. We were very much looking at, one-off customers, looking at the biggest deal size and building our product based on what a customer or a single customer is saying, instead of looking at a product vision and saying, hey, we can take this market and really provide value to our customers by doing X, Y, and Z, which is very different than, hey, we want to close this $1 million deal. Let's just go and build X, Y, and Z, right? And so for myself, when I learned a couple of years later that what that secret sauce was really a PLG organization. And that's what I do most of my talks on, is really just, if you want to be, in my opinion, the best product manager you can be, you want to be at a product-led organization, because you have to be testing and discovering ideas and putting them into the market to see what's going to stick, instead of, big enterprise customers saying, hey, build X, Y, and Z for just us, and, we'll give you this paycheck. And, that's, I think, par for the course of why PLG organizations have the multiples and valuations that they do versus other companies. It's often because they're overreaching and winning a market and being number one.
So we kind of asked this question to all of our guests. What were the lessons that you had to unlearn when you made the transition to PLG?
Oh, that's great. Unlearn. That's a good one. I think for myself, I would probably say, some of the ways that you really test can be really different. I think as a PLG org, learning, how, especially in the e-commerce, the statistical significance that's needed for A/B tests and things like that, you can get really deep in the science of that. With PLG, sometimes testing just prototypes and painted door tests and smoke tests and just activities like that can really give you enough indicators that this is an idea that you should go and launch and produce. But I think the unlearning is how we went and did that was really through typically sales and really communicating with sales and CS to make sure that gets to the right customer base. In a PLG, or you kind of have to unlearn that you just go and do it. Just go and talk to your customers. Just go to your customers. Just send it out the door. Don't worry about it. If you're a product-led company, that's what matters. Getting it in front of the customers first, not playing the politics of going through, account management, customer success, and then getting to the customers. So that's the unlearning, I think, is that, oftentimes when you're at large organizations, there's a lot of steps before you can talk to a customer. And at PLG orgs, I think you have to learn that you just got to bash through and talk to customers right away.
That's great. So in PLG, marketing, product, sales, customer success, all these teams are more closely aligned than ever before. We have talked to a lot of marketers who have worked closely with sales teams in a demand generation or pipeline model. Working with product team is still new for many marketers starting out in product-led companies, right? So you talked about product managers being the glue between teams in the blast-off session as well. So as someone who comes from a product background, how was your experience working with the marketing and sales teams for the first time?
Yeah, I think, I've converted now 2 or 3 companies and businesses into kind of PLG in some form or fashion, even some enterprise organizations that are focused more on Fortune 1000 customers. And there's always room, right? I think to answer your question, I think product managers are often playing that glue role already, right? They're in the middle trying to figure out and get all the inputs from internal stakeholders and hopefully, most importantly, your customers. I think a PLG organization, that is just on steroids, right? You have to be so open and so vulnerable and listening to all of the different inputs and giving that input and letting other teams experiment in your products. So you really have to open that floodgate. To answer your question about marketing and sales and how that's changed and how that's worked, with marketing, it's been really fluid and I think easy because a lot of marketing teams want to be working in with their campaigns in a PLG type fashion. They want to talk about the product quickly. They want to be kind of attaching it to that and then being able to show that they have a great blog post that has nothing to do with the product. They want to be able to say at the end, oh, try the product out. They see PQLs come through a lot faster and success on conversion. So I think with marketing teams, the transition hasn't been that difficult. In fact, I often find they're clamoring for PLG more than other orgs are. Sales, I think, is a different beast. I think that, there's a lot of concern with a lot of sales teams of what PLG is and what it means for them. I think the PLG community or the term, unfortunately, got too focused on free trials and freemium and not needing a sales team. It was very anti-sales, which is not true. It's completely untrue, in fact. Instead, and one of the things I have to do a lot is kind of preach that actually your sales team should be focusing on the value adds and sophistication that customers need or larger customers need and really tailoring demos and product use cases for those customers and let the easy stuff that customers should have light bulb moments on their own alone. That should be the baseline. And instead it's here's a plan that has this value and you need that and really attach to it. So for sales, they should be closing bigger deals, right? With higher conversion, in my opinion. They shouldn't be focusing on the small stuff anymore. So yeah, I think that's one that's still out there. It's difficult, I think, with the sales team because there's a bit of an anti-sales thought process with PLG. And I just don't think that's the case. That should be the case. The last thing I'll say on this is I often talk a lot about expansion with PLG. A lot of PLG focuses on that early PQL and really, conversion at the front. But really, PLG also is about retention and expanding your customers and finding great fit customers that can expand on their own and upgrade on their own. And that's the other side that I think sales can also help with, that you can say, I think this customer is ready for the next step. They're a mature, sophisticated customer now, and they're really doing well with the product. Let's get them to try the next level and help them through that.
So yeah, great. So talking about teams alignment, how are product and marketing teams aligned now at Hootsuite? How did you overcome the initial challenges?
Yeah, it's a icky and tricky question.
Yeah, we are curious, actually.
Yeah. So, we have our customer success and sales teams, and customer success actually reports up to our sales organization. And then we've got our marketing team, which also has a splits kind of between brand marketing and growth marketing. And then product growth actually reports up to our product department, our product management department. But my department's basically right dab in the middle between growth marketing and product management. And we're kind of right in the middle there, working with both sides very consistently. A lot of the job is actually working across all of product management to talk about funnels and adoption funnels and improving conversion and working with growth to understand what's working and what's not. And also utilizing the prowess that growth marketing teams often have in conversion rate optimization and things like that, and bring that into the product. So that's kind of how we're situated. We're right in the middle of kind of growth marketing and product management, I would say. But organizationally, we are now really, trying to align around PLG, and the whole org is kind of determining how that all works I'm really proud of the work that's been done. We have some awesome leaders in our sales organizations who have been even updating their own, org structures to really align to how PLG works. So it's a collective strategy and a collective unit. And, while we have splits in our reporting around the self-serve revenue versus like enterprise or sales revenue, we're kind of removing that notion over time. And I know I see on a lot of S1s and IPO sheets that a lot of companies, like if you look at Vimeo's from last year, they call out their split of self-serve versus enterprise. And I think that's good, but I also think it's missing a bit of the mark of a PLG motion organically.
Yeah. We are talking about working and aligning teams around the PLG strategy a lot. Every team might be approaching the product overall growth and value metrics from different perspectives. But ultimately, growth is when your customers' goals are met with your product, right? How do you define growth in a way that makes sense to both you and the customers? And how do you measure growth?
Yeah, it's a good question. We use the Reforge framework at Hootsuite. There's a lot of different frameworks that call out the light bulb moment, whether it's, Nir Eyal's hooked model, for example, or, so many of them. But at Hootsuite, we use Reforge, which really calls out the setup, aha, and habit moments. And, at Hootsuite, organizationally, we know what drivers and product activities correspond to our customer setup moment, to the customer's aha moment, and to their habit moment. And we have that broken down by segment and industry. So we know, quite a bit how that changes, and we're always looking at it and improving it. In fact, that was a large part of work at the end of last year that we kind of looked and refreshed where we at with some of these things. So, and then we share that organizationally. We talk about it at kickoffs. We talk about it at town halls. And, Hootsuite's pretty large now. We're about 1,400 employees. So there's a lot of people to talk to about this stuff. But that's how we kind of really align organizationally to those metrics and value.
Got it. So we discussed transitioning into product-led from an insider's perspective. Talking about the user's role in growth, user experience has a direct impact on growth. Do you often see challenges when it comes to customer experience transitioning to a self-service or product-led model? And how do you bring in the customer perspectives into the growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand the stakeholders that you're working with. I will either take one of two approaches. One is be very data-driven about it and very numbers-focused. If the other individual and the leaders in, let's say, the customer success team or the sales side, like the folks taking care of the customer experience, CX group, I think if that individual is very numbers-focused, then I would bring things like LTV to CAC ratios and showcase that, where is, what segments are performing well, what segments aren't performing well, and talk about, oftentimes it's the large segments that aren't performing well. How can we make that better? How can we, put some PLG love and motion into that to make your jobs easier and get customers to succeed with the product faster on their own? If the individual's not numbers focused, then I will just take the approach of testing and showcasing that customers can get to that light bulb moment on their own. Sometimes I often will just put that on the website, have a try now experience, showcase the product. If you go to unbounce.com or if you go to Banana Tag, the two companies I've worked at before Hootsuite, they have try now experiences. You can go on the website, see the key part of the product and feel the value moment of that right away. And, I've often run that test just so the CX teams can see how we can do that without all the onboarding specialists need, all the hands-on kind of setup and need. So I really think this should be pitched to those teams as it's going to help you, and you can focus on strategy and really, showcasing value to your customers and getting them to become regular users and sophisticated users of your product.
Got it. So you worked as a product management instructor and teacher. Do you have any tips or best practices for PMs transitioning to a product-led environment?
Oh, yeah, that's a heavy question for sure. I think if you're coming from an organization, first off, if you're just cracking into, product management, or you're trying to join a product management organization and that happens to be PLG, you're going to learn things way faster than many of your other peers would, in my opinion. And I often do talk to PMs, those that are trying to get in the industry, that you should try and find a PLG org if you really want to learn product management quickly and really go through the mud to answer your question, I think my tips for anyone that's joining a PLG org, if you're coming from a sales-led org and an enterprise org that your product management has primarily been, let's talk about, a voice of the customer program, or look at, ideas that our customers, big customers, have voting rights on, or that, you have an organization where maybe the sales team, quarterly will tell you, we're going to lose these customers if we don't build this thing. We're going to gain these customers if we do build this thing. Go and build that. If that's the type of org you're coming from, it's really important to leave almost everything that you've known about validating ideas and building, product management at the door. Because when you join a PLG org, most product managers need to be about 60% of the time on product discovery and strategy, and 40% on delivery, or even less, which means that you need a lot from your developers. You need your developers to be very empowered. They need to understand what you're trying to build. You have to have extreme trust in the process with your designers, your product marketers, and your developers. And oftentimes what I find is at sales-led orgs, a lot of product managers become more business analysts or requirement gatherers, right? They gather requirements from these large organizations and then transfer them over to the developers. That's just not product management in a PLG org. You are really figuring out from a list of hopefully 100 ideas, what's going to make the mark in my product vision, and really understand your company's product vision. And then how am I going to move that forward? How are you going to, test, validate ideas in the market, prototype them, discover them before building a single thing. And a lot of product managers just don't have the access at their company to do true product discovery. A lot of companies say they do, but oftentimes it's either a CEO or founder saying we need to go and build this thing, or big customers saying we need to build this thing to close a big deal. And then the rest of them, are probably more product-led orgs. So that's definitely, if you're coming from a sales-led org, you got to leave a lot of that behind. Definitely leave a lot of the ego behind as well. It's time for new learnings. And also it's an exciting time. It's so much fun being at a product-led organization as a product manager. There's just, you're almost sometimes a sleuth. You're a detective trying to figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work, why didn't it work? And all of your sometimes biases and thoughts. I've had many times where I'm like, this is going to be great. This thing's going to work. And it tanked. It was a flop. I'm like, well, thank goodness we tested that. And there are other times where it's like this small thing. Whoa, what just happened here? Why did that do so much for our customers? So it's really a humbling moment, to join that org. So yeah, I think those are the two sides, right? Coming from sales-led. Obviously, if you are in a PLG org and you continue in a PLG org, but you're not doing some of these discovery pieces, or you're still very much just focused on building out user stories and Jira tickets and requirements, you have to stretch. You have to really understand how can you provide value as a product manager to your business, and how do you evolve your product vision. And that's the key piece. How do you go and evolve your company's product vision for some goal? And a lot of product managers don't even know what that goal is. So it's important to talk to your founders or your exec teams and understand, where are we trying to go? What's the goal for the next 3 to 5 years, right? Are you looking for an exit? Are you looking for a fundraise? Are you looking for an IPO? Understand what it is. Are you looking for none of those things? Are you looking for something completely different? And build and test ways to help that come to fruition. I think those are the 3 different probably categories people are in from a product management perspective, either brand new or coming from more of a sales-led, founder-led org, or hopefully they're at a PLG org.
Right. Yeah, they are great tips. So guys, that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much, Partho, for your valuable time and inputs. We'll be featuring you again in future episodes. We have a lot to learn from you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.